Hey everyone, welcome back to M&M IELTS. This is Manmohit. Now, guys, in today's video, I am going to share with you all some of the most common phrases for your IELTS speaking module. Those ones which you can simply memorize, and then those are the ones you can use in any sort of cue cards you get, in any sort of questions that are being asked to you by the actual examiner, and they will help you to form your answers. And using these phrases, it will show to the examiner that you do have a variety of content, you do have a variety of different phrases, and you have got a good command over the language. Yes, you do have to have a relevant content that goes with that, but at least these can act as your structure, some linking phrases for you to start your sentences, introduce them, connect something different, give your reasons, conclude something, and so on. Without wasting any further ado, let's dive right into it. The very first one is when you want to introduce your opinion, when you want to introduce something for the very first time. So there's 5 that I have got. You can simply take a picture, write them down in a notebook, whatever is convenient for you guys. You can use in my opinion. That's a very common and straightforward one. From my perspective, if we are introducing something new, so instead of repeating the same in my opinion again and again, you can have a bit more variety and say from my perspective. Then we have got I believe that. When you say I believe that, you're giving a bit of a surety to the examiner that you are saying something from your own experience. As far as I'm concerned, great one to use, a bit lengthy too. So with that will show to the examiner you have got a good command over the language. So good, definitely a good one to use. And finally, personally, I think you're personalizing your opinion and introducing something for the first time. Personally, I think blah blah blah. So whatever you want to say after that. So these 5 are when you're introducing something for the very first time. Next, when you are agreeing with something or you are disagreeing with something, these are some of the most common and the important ones that you can use in your speaking. I agree with, straightforward, but a good vocab, good words, a good phrase, decent one in terms of length. I see your point, but. So it's basically when you are disagreeing with something, so you do not just disagree straight away. You first acknowledge their statement and then you disagree. That's kind of a professional way of delivering something. So you can say, I see your point, but, and then you give your contradicting point after that. That's true. However, again, saying yes, that is right, but then you're giving something of your own opinion after that. I'm afraid I disagree because it's a very common saying when we say in a day to day life that I'm afraid. I'm afraid means I'm sorry, but then I'm afraid I disagree because, and then you give your reason after that. Again, an amazing one to use. And finally, I couldn't agree more with whatever you want to say after that, but you can start your sentence with I couldn't agree more. So that's when you agree or disagree with something. Please memorize these ones and have a variety. And the best way you can do is when you practice your speaking after this, use these phrases when you speak your cue cards, when you give your answers for part 1, or whenever you speak anything for your IELTS speaking. Try having a bit of variety every single time. Keep practicing and memorizing them on a daily basis, and soon these things, these phrases will be at the back of your mind. You wouldn't even have to think about them before speaking your answer. Next is when you are going to give few examples. Obviously, when you give some sort of ideas, you always support it by giving some examples in the real exam. And the great ones, having a bit of variety as well, would be, for example, you can start when you give your example for the first time, you can say, for example. That's a very common thing to say. But afterwards, if you are going to give another example, instead of repeating for example again, you can say such as, to illustrate, for instance. A good example of this is, if you want to have a bit more variety, like when something happened, there were so many people who did that. So again, like when can be used when you are going to give some sort of an example. So again, great ones to use. And if you want to have a variety when you give examples, these are some of the phrases that you can use. Expressing uncertainty. When you are uncertain about something, how do you express that? So again, I've got 5 for you. You can simply memorize them and then you can express your uncertainty when you're not sure of something. First one, I'm not entirely sure, but, and then you can have your sentence after that. I'm not 100% certain, but I think, and then you give your fact or you give your opinion after that. It's difficult to say for sure, but again, you give something after that. I'm not too familiar with that, but again, something after that. And finally, I'm not entirely convinced about, and then you give another idea after that. So if you cannot memorize all five, that's fine. Just memorize two, because expressing uncertainty, that's not something you would be doing again and again. But if you have to do it twice, at least you will have two separate phrases that you can choose from. So just pick any two or three maximum if you want to, whichever ones you feel are easy for you to memorize. Just memorize those and you would be all good with any sort of cue cards that you get in your real exam. Next would be when you give reasons and any sort of explanations. So those five, again, you can memorize two or three out of it and it will do the job for you. The main reason for this is that, and then you explain what the reason is. One possible explanation could be, and then you give your reasoning after that. This can be attributed to, again, a great one to memorize, and it's got a good vocabulary word in that, attributed. So it's a good one to memorize. The factor that stands out here is it's a bit, let's say, complex way of saying a sentence, but then if you memorize this, it will help you to give your reason in a bit more complex way. And then it's largely due to the fact that, and whatever you want to say in terms of your reasoning and explanation, these phrases will help you to give your reasons and explaining whatever content you're explaining over there. Then finally, we do have is conclusion. Obviously, whenever you speak for any sort of cue card, we always recommend to conclude your answer. Do not just leave it hanging. And when you have to conclude, to conclude is very common. In conclusion is very common, but then there's a bit of variety that you can use. You can say to sum up instead of saying in conclusion. To sum up. Yes, you can say in conclusion at one place. Then overall. Just saying the word overall also means that you're going to give some sort of conclusion after that. To wrap it up, because you're wrapping up your answer, that means to wrap it up and then you give your conclusion. And finally, in summary. So you do have 5 options to choose from. In conclusion is a good one. If you feel that you have got 2 conclusions that you're going to speak, in one place you can say in conclusion, and in another place you can say something different to sum it up, to wrap it up, overall, to sum up. All these different types of phrases just to show to the examiner that you're not just bound by those limited words, but you do have a bit more variety in terms of your answers, in terms of your phrases. And finally, let's say the examiner said something and you were unsure what that examiner said. You didn't hear properly or you didn't understand the question. In those cases, when you want to clarify what the examiner said, or when you want that examiner to repeat the information, these are the phrases that you can use. Obviously, you can just say, sorry, can you please repeat, and they'll repeat it. But even in that, you can show to the examiner that you have got a great command over the language by having a variety even when you want to clarify something. You can say, could you please repeat that as your very first time? Then if you want them to repeat again, you can say, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you say it again? Great one to use. Would you mind explaining that a bit further? Great command over the language. Could you clarify what you mean by when you say this? Whatever question was there, could you clarify what you mean by that? And finally, I'm not sure I understand. Could you elaborate? Students feel that if they ask for clarification or repetition of the question, that means they will lose band for that. No, it doesn't work like that. Even examiners know that you are also a human being, so you will need a bit of clarification when you're unsure of something. So when you ask that with confidence and you use these kind of great phrases, it shows to the examiner that it was an honest mistake, you didn't hear properly, or it wasn't clear enough to you, and you're clarifying that by using some different variety of words. And trust me, these words, these phrases will also help you to increase your band score, because overall performance is what you get marked on in the real exam. And when you use these kind of phrases, even just to get the question repeated, examiner knows that, okay, this person has got a great command over the language, is confident, didn't understand the question properly, and that is why they are asking for the repetition of the question or asking for a clarification. These are the phrases that I wanted to share in this video. Feel free to watch the video again, take some screenshots if you have to, write them down if you can. I always recommend all my students to write all the phrases down in their notebook, because then it becomes easy for them to memorize them. You can memorize easier when you have got written that stuff down in your own handwriting rather than reading it off a computer or reading it off someone else's handwriting. So that's a good way for you to memorize them. Guys, all the best if you have got your exams coming soon. If you have any sort of questions, feel free to put it in the comments down below, and me and Mohit will answer all of you as quickly as possible. Stay safe wherever you are, and I will see you all in the next one.